Howdy, folks. Richard Avery from Titanium Computing, the element need to keep your business running. Continuing our interview series with cybersecurity experts and products in the industry. I've mentioned it over and over again that I'm in Austin, Texas, which is one, in my opinion, I don't know if there's actually a list somewhere, top 10 cybersecurity cities in the world. At least that's my personal opinion. There's so many cybersecurity companies here, so many cybersecurity professionals, some of the world's literally greatest hackers. That's documented. And with me, I have Steve Hall from Lucy Security. He's the VP of Sales and someone who I've known for a long time. Lots of the people that I'm interviewing are cybersecurity experts and professionals that I've known here in Austin. As a matter of fact, behind Steve is a picture of a very well-known Austin landmark. Steve, thanks a lot for taking some time out of your busy schedule with Lucy to answer some questions for us and our viewers.
Sure, absolutely.
So let's kick this off. Lucy is a email security, cybersecurity product for end user email protection. Am I right with that, or is there more?
A little bit more than that, actually. So we actually provide resources for companies and institutions to provide protection for their most important asset, the human element, right? Because as we all know, like 97% of the attacks actually happen through email or some kind of phishing attack with their employees. So we actually protect them through a number of different resources that we provide through our software. That either protects them through phishing attacks or through training, through security awareness resource kind of templates that we provide out of the box. And also not to mention the fact that we have other elements to help with companies to kind of help IT staff reduce time to critical tasks. Because a lot of times, as we all know, IT staff is just overloaded nowadays, underfunded. And of course, a lot of times they need tools to actually get in their hands to kind of get them directly to the heart that matters in a lot of the attacks, and have just a quicker response time. So that way it frees them up to kind of address other kind of issues that they have in the IT group as well. Not to mention, we do provide resources for, like, say, dark web monitoring as well. But yeah, Lucy, in essence, is an umbrella company, provides complete resources to kind of help protect the human element in a company, whether it be their employees, whether it be the IT staff, or their C-level executives and such. So, but anyways, hopefully that addresses that question. But yeah,
it does. And we talked a little bit before we started recording that you do vishing and smishing attacks and security as well, which is unique in the space. A lot of other providers are just, oh, here's some email phishing templates and we can do these things and help test your employees, but that's extra.
It is. There's obviously we see the need for these kind of defenses for companies. A lot of times we actually see it where CXOs actually have, like, say, their administrators or kind of executive assistants, where they actually get sent links, and then of course a person thinks it's from that CXO, and they click on the link, and then of course they actually then provide their credentials, and then now you got backdoor access to get critical information out of that company, basically. So we see that kind of attack happen a lot more lately, of course. And so with that, we actually provide resources to help companies to address that, not to mention the fact that we have capabilities to help them understand, educate their employees to understand what to look out for on those SMS attacks or links that they should not be clicking on with their phone. And of course, you can actually even put posters up in the organization. You can actually kind of put it on USB sticks and USB drives. Number of different ways we actually allow the companies to do that. But we definitely see that on the rise in the market right now.
SMS attacks are some of the worst that are out there. Most people don't have antivirus on their phones. Some phones you can't install antivirus on. iPhones have that. We don't have viruses. We don't have that virus problem. So they make it very hard for you to have additional security products on their stuff. So I see SMS attacks all the time. And most people don't realize that Apple pays $1 million for a bug bounty for a zero-click, zero user interface hack of the phone, but almost all of those are via SMS. So that also pivots to, people don't realize that there's a black market for those attacks. And those are anywhere from 2.5 to $5 million. So there are people actively going out of their way to try and use SMS as an attack vector. And our phones are practically, I got my wallet here and I got my phone here. I'd way rather lose my wallet than I'd lose my phone nowadays, because everything's on my phone, right? My bank accounts, I've got my authenticators, I've got a bunch of other stuff, but most people aren't thinking about that when they're trying to secure those mobile devices, especially at the small to medium business entry point.
Yeah. Well, and we see that too, and I think that's actually one of the reasons why we're seeing an increase in, like, say, network mapping kind of companies, startups, technology firms. Basically, it's definitely a market we're seeing an increase in. Where now you ask any CXL level person in the company, are you 100% sure what's on your network? They're all going to say no. Right? No person knows exactly what's on their network, and that includes phones, right? Because a lot of times phones are touching critical data. And then, of course, they have users that actually are kind of on them. But a lot of times companies have, like, say, company issued phones with SMS numbers. But I would say 99% of the time when those employees get those phones, there is no training whatsoever on security practices around those phones, right? Ever. We see that time and time again, right? So we could go into companies, we ask the question, what kind of resources or training do you actually have in place to protect your employees that get staff issued phones or mobile devices, including tablets and laptops? And a lot of times they're given a laptop, they have to sign a document, as you know, yes, I promise to take care of this critical device. And that's it. They're off and running, basically, and they're using the phone and they're using a laptop and using a mobile device. But there is no training, there's no resources in place most times that we see on those companies. And then, of course, they get exposed, and then, of course, they click on a link they shouldn't have, or they click on an SMS message they shouldn't have. And we ask every single time, what kind of resources did you have in place to help prevent that employee from doing that? And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, yeah, we didn't really issue any kind of training or resources when they issued that device. And that's a problem.
And it's a huge problem. And it's great that there's somebody out there who's saying, hey, we do this. We're kind of niche in the market. We offer SMS services and training for users. There's a lot of people that offer training for companies out there. I'm one of them, and you're one of them, and this video might go up with somebody else who's one of them. But it's still a continued growing trend that, when asked, at CEO World did a poll, and only 23% of CEOs actually felt that they were comfortable for their cybersecurity footprint and how they were going to be protected. Most boards of companies only feel that 50% of them are properly secured against cybersecurity attacks. So this huge threat space that even C-level people who have the ability to make the decision and spend the money are still intentionally not securing, which is why we have this growing attack of ransomware. I'm sure that you guys, being in the space, are just seeing ransomware left and right.
Oh, it's so massive out there in the market. We're seeing it on the rise. This is also the reason why we're seeing a huge rise. If you look at the insurance companies, I would say the biggest sector out of every single major insurance company is cyber insurance right now. They're growing by 30 to 35% per year over year right now. And the reason why is because the companies are getting hacked. And of course, it's costing these insurance companies an arm and a leg to cover those losses, because it's a loss of data, it's a loss of time, it's a loss of revenue. And of course, so companies can ill afford that. And then there are some instances where a contract can't even be signed with certain companies because they do not have a good cyber insurance policy in place. So ransomware is definitely on the rise. We actually do provide resources to help with the staff to understand what to look out for on those ransomware attacks. And a lot of companies actually have this sense of where they're protected because they've got a backup. And that just doesn't cut it anymore. And are here to tell companies, like, no, you need to do better than that. Even if you have a backup, there's going to be data loss somewhere along those lines. And so you have to come to the realization that it's an eventuality, right? I think that's where more companies are starting to kind of get behind, is the fact that this is an eventuality. It's going to happen. You're going to have exposed data somehow, somewhere at some time. What you need to actually understand is how to understand how to prevent the critical loss of data and how to prevent massive exploitations against your data, right? So if you got, like, say, a single use instance of a person getting exposure, but you actually are having just one occurrence, but fortunately, you've got a good practice in place for all your staff to understand what to look out for, it's not going to spread. Because a lot of times those kind of attacks through ransomware, it gets spread through other kind of emails. Like, so Joe gets email from Steve, he clicks on that link, that Steve link sent. It's also now exposed other critical data that Joe may have actually had access to, right? So, and that's usually how it happens. It spreads out, and then that's when it gets really bad, right? So, and of course, we're seeing that also with even infrastructure. So if you remember Colonial Pipeline, they got breached. And of course, a lot of times what happens with these attacks is it's not just the company that gets exposed or hacked. It's really actually going to be these supply chain companies. And this is actually a critical piece with Lucy, right? Because a lot of companies that provide security awareness training and resources against that, they provide it up to a certain point. And that usually ends at the company perimeter, right? Their network, and that's it. Anything beyond that, this is not covered. A lot of times that's even in kind of like policies and documentation. Well, with Lucy, we can go beyond that. We can actually cover the entire supply chain, because those are the kind of companies that are getting targeted by so to speak, the attackers, right? Because they're going out there, the small guys, they're going after the companies that they know are like, 25 to 50 employees. They don't have a good security awareness policy in place. They don't have a good IT staff. They're usually outsourcing it to an MSP like you all or something like that. And a lot of times MSP is going to tell them, it's like, you guys need to have a good security awareness policy in place. So you guys need to have a better defense. But a lot of times these companies are hearing that, but they're not accepting it. And so they just kind of move on and say, like a full circle, going back to it. No, we've got a good backup in place that we're good enough. And that's not good enough anymore. So yeah, to answer your question, there's a lot of rise on the ransomware. We can address that, but there's a lot of different things we're seeing out there in the market. With the insurance kind of carriers, and of course the policies, and of course the supply chains getting attacked and hit, as opposed to the big companies. Because the big companies have a good defense. They've got staff. They've got these kind of risk policies in place, right? But everybody out there knows that's not who you go after. You go after the small guys.
You're absolutely right. One of the interesting interviews we did earlier was with Danny Jenkins, from the CEO of ThreatLocker. And he was talking about a particular vulnerability attack that was coming through email. Again, right? Email attacks, right? Phishing. And all it was doing was, once it got into your machine, it looked for registry keys to see if you had QuickBooks installed, look at your latest QuickBook files, copy the latest QuickBook files to them. And then that was it. It deleted itself. But that was to then go into a second stage of attack using business email compromise, and going on to the next level of phishing and saying, hey, Billy, last Friday when you wire transferred $13,600 to us, that's great. We have a new transfer you need to use instead of the old one. So they send an email out like 2 days before the normal wire transfer goes out, or the normal payment goes out. Hey, we have a new payment you need to make. It's over here. Our payment merchant account servicer changed, or we have a new wire address, or we have a new bank account, or a new ACH. And so they just used the QuickBooks file as intelligent knowledge to then create a second stage attack, so that the person reading it was like, oh, well, of course it's Billy. Who else would know that we just paid him $16,357 last month?
Yep.
Right. So, boom, it goes right through the head. Right. When I train people, I'm like, what would cause you to fall victim to a phishing attack? What would elicit you to click on something? And those are the kinds of attacks you need to prepare yourself for. So being able to create custom templates and custom emails and custom training is really critical in the workspace.
Absolutely.
Using products like Lucy. Have you seen that the new supposed cyber threat number is going to be, by 2025, cybercrime is estimated to be $10.5 trillion.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's insane. The GDP of the United States is only 20 trillion. or like 19.2 or something like that. Who knows what it's at now with COVID?
Yeah.
But like it's astronomical. And you and I still run into every day companies who don't have anything in place.
Yep.
What's the number
Go ahead.
one challenge what's the number one thing you hear when you're like, hey, let's get some training, let's get some phishing simulations going for your company? What's the first thing that you hear as an objection?
So that's a great question. I think the number one thing that we actually see play out time and time again is that it's just not important. Companies have other priorities to address with their IT staff, right? And we see this play out all the time. And I think that's actually something that falls upon the stakeholders in the company, right? The board members, like CXOs, that there needs to be a universal paradigm shift on these folks that are actually addressing where the money goes in their company, right? Because a lot of times the funds get allocated towards different things within the company, and everybody gets it. Now, like there's a certain finite amount of resources that companies have to address every single thing that's actually in their company, and everybody's actually kind of screaming, "No, this is critical, critical, critical. Let me need." Whether it be HR, whether it be HRIS, whether it be IT, whether it be ops, you name it. Now, we all know this. Now, the problem is we need to actually make sure the stakeholders and CXOs understand that this is something that has to be addressed now. It can't be addressed in the future. It has to be addressed now. And so that's number one. Number two is the fact that we need to actually make sure the folks that typically talk to us are going to be security folks, right? So chief security officers, security managers, things like that, right? So cyber risk people are great to talk to in organizations as well. But a lot of times they have this understanding that it's a insurmountable task because it's going to cost much money. And we're here to tell companies, no, we can actually get resources in hands of companies at a fraction of the cost for what companies have out there. Just because of the fact that there's this huge kind of stigma where it's going to cost a lot of money to get security awareness policy in place. A lot of times, we actually come in there and shock people with actually understanding that, no, we can actually get a resource in your hands for a fraction of the cost what's out there in the market, because our solutions are a little bit different. We don't really kind of do per se, but we do flat-based cost. But that's with Lucy. So I think that in broader sense, though, there's just that kind of thing to hold people back where they think it's cost prohibitive, I should say, with a solution. And then I think the third thing we're seeing is there's got to be a push from the policy and insurance companies, right? And so we're seeing a lot of insurance companies and policy companies too, where there has to be a check the box, so to speak, right? With companies now. With GDPR and some of these other big pushes for data protection and relevancy, we're seeing a lot of companies now actually have it in documentation where they have to have a security awareness policy in place. You have to have this. And so we're actually getting companies that come to us where we need the solution because we definitely have to check the box, but they want to do something more, right? So those are the big three things we're seeing, right? There's got to be a better understanding from top level down that this is very important. And then of course, the second thing, like I addressed, is the whole cost prohibitive thought process or paradigm that needs to go away. This is not something that's going to be costing most companies an arm and a leg. It can be addressed at a relatively low cost. And then the third thing is, like I mentioned, there's got to be a big policy push for this more and more, right? Because I know with the executive office in place for the U.S., there's obviously this big push for security. And I think Biden actually just mentioned this, where he's actually having this a big push for more security kind of practices and policies in place, especially after the Kyocera attack, especially after the Colonial Pipeline, and especially after the supply chain. Again, going back to the supply chain kind of attacks that are happening, that actually kind of reduced the poultry kind of shipments throughout the nation. Yeah, people were freaking out a bit because they couldn't get their chicken sandwiches and
KFC.
No. Yeah,
they're putting signs up. There was actually a franchise, I think in the UK or in Scotland. They literally had a big sign at their door saying, "We apologize, we don't have any chicken."
Yeah,
KFC doesn't have any chicken. Now, those are isolated events, and you're talking about. So you mentioned GDPR. How much impact are you seeing from the California Protection Act? Because we are seeing a lot of that higher level push from federal agency and state agency. We're in Texas, you and we've got
Mhm.
not just HIPAA, which is a federal control, but we have House Bill 300, which is a state level control that's kind of like super HIPAA, right? People that are
Mhm.
not HIPAA qualified still fall under House Bill 300. And now we've got this other
Mhm.
push coming in from California with the California Protection Act. And a lot of people say, as goes California, as goes the nation. So are you seeing other companies come in, not just from the insurance standpoint, which is really strong? We interviewed Art Gross from Incyber, and he was saying, hey, it used to be a 2-page, like you got an antivirus check, firewall check. No, now it's this like 18-page. Are
Oh
you
yeah.
doing ISO 27K? Are you doing NIST, CSF? What are you doing to be compliant?
Mhm.
And email phishing simulations are becoming part of that questionnaire. How often are you,
Mhm.
what is that ratio of people calling into you saying we need this because of CPA, CPA, hospital 3,
Mhm.
we need something because it's being demanded of us?
Yeah, yeah. I think so. What we're seeing is a lot of times because the companies actually outsource their entire kind of technology requirements to an MSP like you guys, right? So a lot of times we actually get these kind of questions from companies like yours, where they're MSPs. They're representing a state organization or maybe even a local city level or county level organization, or they have to have that kind of like check the box, so to speak, kind of requirement. And then of course we actually can help fulfill that, but go a little bit further and take it to the next step, obviously. But we're definitely seeing a rise in that. Like I mentioned before, our companies are starting to come in and having to kind of check the box. But we're definitely seeing it more from like the MSP level, because the MSPs are the ones that are usually working on the infrastructure and the requirements for these companies. And the companies, they understand it, but they don't have an ideal as far as what's in place, what needs to happen, and of course, what happens in 5 years from now, right? Whereas the MSPs typically have a better sense. Okay, we understand. Here's the documentation that's in place. Here's what needs to happen, and here's a 5-year plan beyond that, right? And so we're definitely seeing that, especially with Texas as well, because with Texas, you got this big push from DIR, where they're actually kind of pushing requirements. And we are on that DIR list, as a matter of fact, as an authorized vendor here in Texas for state agencies to kind of work with. But yeah, we're definitely seeing it across the board, and even from California as well.
Yeah, most people don't realize that Texas is, because Austin is the capital of Texas, and Austin is a world-leading cybersecurity city. Texas's cybersecurity requirements legally are actually really high. Like we demand
Mhm.
schools have something, we demand institutions that get, state grants have something. We demand like these push from a legal standpoint. That's why when I talk to people all the time, I'm like, hey, are you guys House Bill 300 compliant? They're like, huh? What? Never even heard of that before, right? Kind of conversations. So
Mhm.
when do you have like a before and after case study? This is the additional security protection that Lucy has given, has implemented, has provided our users.
So it's interesting. There's a couple, but I think there's one that I want to touch up on that goes back to your store, that you actually have another person you're actually working with, where that person was able to kind of come in and take that attack, and $16,000. Well, yeah, Joe, we worked with them. So we had another MSP that we worked with that was in the mortgage industry. And that happens quite a bit in the mortgage industry, where a person buys a house, all of a sudden they get a link from Steve that sold them their house, and says, go here to this link to sign the documents, and so that way we can transfer the money to the right ACH. And then they fill out everything. Lo and behold, they're out of $300,000, and they don't know why. It's because they clicked on that link, they filled out their information, but it was because somebody actually got their information that they were selling a house and basically used that for an attack. So we are definitely seeing that in the mortgage space. So we had an MSP that specialized in that world, where they were working with mortgage and real estate companies, typically to kind of help provide them security awareness training to kind of, hey, this is what to look out for. This is what you should actually tell your customers to look out for as well, because a lot of times, and you know both bought a house, right? You sign the documents. You signed, well, there's several levels of document signing, right? But is there ever a point in the documentation where you sign something that says, here's a security document. This is what something you should look out for. Don't fall victim to any kind of SMS links. Don't send any kind of financial information to somebody that you do not physically know or trust. If you do need to do this, meet that person face to face so you can get that information to them that way. But you and I both know there's never a document that you sign that says that or encapsulates that, right? So that's what the MSP actually kind of specialized in, is they were using our product to help kind of provide that kind of resource and documentation to the mortgage and title companies to provide to their customers, not just to their customers, but also to their employees, to help them understand what to look out for, right? And so that's a single use case that I know of recently that was actually kind of very, very good. We have a few different ones, but yeah, definitely, I think that one ties into your story that you're giving to or another person that you were interviewing as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You know, realtors and mortgage companies and title, they are all just onslaughted with phishing links and phishing emails and spam and garbage. And most people don't realize that it's some attackers, everybody has a different mindset. Some attackers are trying to ransomware you immediately. Others, they just want to get in your system. They want to dwell. They want to learn.
Yeah.
Oh, you're a real estate agency? Oh, I just need to hang out until you sell a house. Right? I'm just going to wait here, and I'm going to copy all your emails, and I'm going to transfer them, and I'm waiting for that email, and then bam, 3 a.m. I'm pretending to be you using your email account. I'm not pretending to be you from the customer's perspective, the home buyer, the seller. I am you. I'm emailing from your account, and like it becomes very powerful. I just hung out here for a while, but it was because you clicked that link 2 years ago or 6 months ago, probably a month ago. And I got in, and you never reset your password. You didn't realize that, you know, there's no virus in your computer. You gave me access to your cloud email.
Yep.
It's a huge problem. So that's great to hear that Lucy gave that extra level of protection to those agencies. And that
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's so how I don't want to keep you too long. You know, I try to ask some interesting questions. So you mentioned earlier about the federal level. At the federal level, people are trying to up the game, trying to make things better, trying to make things more secure.
Correct.
I've asked this bomb question, and I'm using other people's words. Joe Biden calls you up. President Biden calls up Steve Hall and says, "Steve, I think you do great work. I watched some of your interviews. I've seen some of the work you do. I need to make you the new cyber czar of America. You're in charge. What's the first policy mandate that you push out into America?"
Me personally, I would make it where companies are required to have security awareness policy in place. Bottom line, and they have to have it done by a certain time, or there are going to be penalties. Once you have a penalty involved in that process, it becomes a whole different conversation with companies because they want to avoid those penalties, right? So right now it's more of a recommendation, but companies don't actually have that penalty. The penalty they risk is actually extreme because they risk losing their data or getting exposed in a data breach, right? But there's no penalty to pay if they don't have or implement a good security awareness policy in place. But I also think there should be a bigger policy in place for companies in general, beyond security awareness, right? So I know a lot of companies actually, I mentioned the backup kind of like policy. A lot of companies think they're good enough because they've got a good backup in place. That doesn't cover it, right? So there needs to be something that protects the employee, the human element in the companies, which we can help with. There needs to be something to help prevent and protect the capital infrastructure, right? So their equipment, their buildings and such. And I think there needs to be something to protect the data element, right? So I think right now, those three things aren't really covered by a universal policy, right? So I think if I were to be that person, I think that's the first thing I always do to create a policy that covers those three things. Have something, you have to have this in place to cover all three of those elements. And if not, then you risk a penalty that's going to be pretty significant if you don't meet it by a certain kind of timeline. That's what I would do.
Appreciate the answering of that question. I want to go back real quick And we talked about phishing, which is just, phishing, which, there's arguments on where the first appearance of that was in 1995, 1996, AOL, wherever it was. And smishing and vishing. Smishing is attacks that go against your phone, SMS attacks, which is where the SM comes from, and the V is vishing, which is voice solicitation, or I'm attacking voicemails, or I'm leaving voicemail information. What other forms of attack are people typically not aware of exist? Like if you were going to say, hey, what's one thing that you think everybody should know, but almost no one in the industry you talk to knows about?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that that exists out there is that besides the phishing and smishing attacks and some of the other kind of like email attacks we're seeing, is there are some instances where we're seeing a rise in, say, kind of entertainment gaming exposure, right? So we're actually seeing that as a risk for a lot of data elements, because a lot of people game nowadays, right? So we can see that a lot. I game, but I'm sure you game as well. But I definitely think that there is a rise in some of those people that are using that are clicking on links they shouldn't on their devices. A lot of times it's actually bloatware. And even the federal government actually kind of stepped in. Like a good example would be, TikTok, right? So TikTok, everybody uses it, loves it, but I think there are some data elements in the TikTok platform that the federal government is actually kind of wary of, and that's one of the reasons why they were kind of like, not so much. And I think that's actually something we're seeing a little bit more in games and other kind of platforms, is to look out for certain things that are actually kind of pop up in the game you're playing. Don't click on that. I mean, you shouldn't have to. I think you're probably going to see a rise in that kind of attack. It's phishing, but it's phishing for information through entertainment platforms, and I think that's going to be something that we have to be kind of careful of.
So you're saying when the solitaire game on my phone asks to access the files and contact my phone, I should say no?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love, there's a great image I've seen going around of the flashlight app that you have installed is asking for complete control of your phone.
Yes.
Right, things like that. But that's a great point, right? That is an intent to gain additional information, either for a future attack or to sell it explicitly, and you're typically not made aware, and sometimes that's not even in the EULA. Worse, companies get hacked and their supply chain, as you've mentioned multiple times, supply chain attacks are becoming the thing. And one of the things that I ran into not too long ago, there was an older platform program which would be called, abandonware at this point. But it had a call out, like when it would install, it would call out to an old domain. That domain doesn't exist anymore. It hasn't existed since 2005.
Right.
And people still use the program because it's free. Well, somebody went out and bought the domain and then rewrote the API for the call. Then when it asked to see if there was a new version, it said, yes, here's a new version. And when they clicked yes to download a new version, all they did was infect themselves.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So like there's these people are intentionally sitting there going, how can I go steal money from people? They're just sitting like, drinking, how do I steal money today?
Yeah.
And
exactly.
they're not thinking, and it's really hard for an end user to be aware of all of these things.
Yeah, and especially with the rise of digital currency and digital assets, NFTs, crypto, you name it. You're definitely going to see a lot of these actually are going to be exposed, because I know that crypto was supposed to be the most secure way to kind of like payment. Well, look what just happened just 1 or 2 months ago, right? So I think one of the bigger crypto platforms got hacked. And they lost what, $60 million in currency. And maybe like a quarter of that has been reclaimed by the government. But again, you can't really kind of track that information down, even with a blockchain, right? So it's hard to kind of have companies fully reclaim that. And so I think that's something else to be kind of wary of, right? So you got, like you said, my phone and my wallet. If I were to lose my phone, that would absolutely be devastating to me, because I have access to all those different kind of platforms and all those different kind of monetary kind of like depositories that now somebody else has access to, right? So again, and they also have access to my contact list. So then they can go and take it a step further and reach out to other folks and do the same thing that they did to me as well, right? So that's just yeah, that's an unfortunate way of things right now, but just something to kind of like be wary of, if anything else.
All right. Thanks a lot, Steve. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I really appreciate you sitting down for this interview, helping our viewers, listeners, kind of
Yeah.
jump through some of those hurdles with us, and to learn a little bit more about Lucy. Where would they go if they wanted to check the product out?
Yeah, great question. So they can actually go to lucysecurity.com, or they can actually go to lucysecurity.na, or lucysecurity. Yeah, lucysecurity.com is actually going to be the best way to get a hold of the company. But if any users actually or persons want to actually have just some questions answered, they can just email me at steve@lucysecurity.com.
Fantastic. Can you hook them up with a demo account?
Absolutely.
All right. There you go, people. Steve will hook you up with a demo account for Lucy. You can see what benefits they can give your organization, help you check those boxes before those boxes become federally or state mandated, because it's coming. It's not an if, it's simply a when. So get something in place, and Lucy's as good as anything else out there. As a matter of fact, it's got things that nobody else does, so it might be the best. Thanks a lot, Steve. Really appreciate it.
No worries.
Hope you all have a great day.
Thanks, Richard. Take care.